Hey, it's Ben from the Warehouse Underground podcast. Running out of space in your facility. It is one of the worst things that can happen. Completely slows down your op. But the customer doesn't care. That's your problem, right? But it doesn't have to be. There is a solution out there that can be a shelter in the storm until it blows over. And that can come from Warehouse on Wheels. They deliver on-demand storage trailers when you need them that flex with your operation. And with locations all across North America, there's a very good chance that they can help you too. No long-term leases for a new facility, no delays, no overpaying for space you don't need, no CapEx, just simple, smart storage delivered right to your door. So don't let your dock and your aisles become jam-packed with pallets wrecking your operation. No, let WOW be your side storage solution while you go back to focusing on mainline operations. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to episode number 27 at the Warehouse Underground podcast, Real Talk for warehouse, DC, and FC professionals of all levels around the globe. I'm Ben, the host of the show, and joining me on the show today is Dominic Lindsay. Now, he is the CEO and founder of Nexobot, making automation accessible to operations of all sizes. Now, in fulfillment center world, distribution center world, there is a big, giant piece of machinery that everyone is familiar with called a sorter. If you work in this industry, you know that it is the bread and butter, at least for the outbound side of the operation. Quick summary, it is a giant conveyor that spits packages down the chutes that they're supposed to go down to meet the carrier on the other end, whatever the carrier it may be, or whatever the time slot may be that the packages are supposed to leave. But the thing is that this technology is great, very great, but it's almost always only seen in big time fulfillment centers, big time distribution centers. The small warehouses usually do the same task, but they almost always do it manually, either by an individual person or a team of people. But Dominic has created something very cool that I'm excited to learn more about in Nexobot, which may bring this type of solution to everyone and no longer just the big time fulfillment centers and distribution centers. So with that, I'll bring him on the stage right now. Dominic, or Dom, my friend, thank you very much for coming on the Warehouse Underground podcast. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Good. Now, so you're Australian, and we talked a little bit before the show. You're in Boston now, so you just got off the incredible 16-hour flight that takes you to the U.S. So I appreciate you adjusting to the time slots and the time zones, and picking up and doing the podcast with me. Thank you.
No, not a problem.
Yeah. So I talked a little bit about in the intro your new company, Nexobot, and what you've created. And we'll get into that in the show. But just can you tell the audience a little bit about you and what is your background in the distribution and the supply chain world?
Yeah, so obviously very Australian centric. Never worked in supply chain outside of Australia. But basically, I started my career straight out of university at our national carrier, Australia Post, where I was very, very quickly dealing with very, very big sorting machines. You know, some of our sorters over at Australia Post are designed to do 20,000 plus items per hour. So they're quite substantial in size. And there I started to see that, you know, what we really needed to do was to control more and more of the supply chain within the Australia Post network. And so I had the opportunity to work with a team to spin up a fulfillment business unit. So I went essentially from parcel sorting to e-commerce fulfillment all within Australia Post. And while at Australia Post building up the fulfillment unit, I then had exposure to AMR technology. So that's the thing that you see at the Amazon warehouses, moving parcels on shelves and items on shelves from a storage area to a picker so they can fulfill e-commerce orders quicker, and really just fell in love with robotics as a way to fulfill orders. And then, you know, obviously saw that sorting was an area that really wasn't supported with that kind of technology.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, sorters are great. I mean, a great piece of tech and everybody relies on them, but they are big, big, fast, and they're usually, and almost the ones that I've seen, they're heavy conveyor belt side. right? So, the robot part of it is usually very small. So, what was your what was your overall inspiration? I mean, I know you launched Nexobot and we'll get into it, but what made you want to kind of start the company in this, what I think is a very unique and very frankly cool solution?
Yeah, so really it just came down to continuously seeing more and more solutions in the goods to person space. So helping people pick e-commerce orders, pick retail orders, and the technology there is getting really sophisticated, especially when you take a look at the shelf to person systems. But what was really lacking was the sourcing side. I just kept on and you mentioned that sourcing is typically a very, very big piece of technology. And what typically people end up doing is they go, if I can't put a sorter in that's going to do, direct to where I want it to go, so to this store, to this pallet, to this order, what people are typically doing is they're sorting to a lane that maybe serves 8 orders or 8 pallets or 8 bags or things like that. And what that means is you've then got to then resort that freight into individual orders or pallets. So I really wanted to come up with a solution that could get small to medium volumes right the way down to the pallet level in a single activity.
Yeah. Yeah, very very cool, and everything that you just described actually happens, right? I've seen that with my own eyes, I know that you have as well, and if it's not exactly how you laid out, it's some version of that
Mm.
is close to. So, but how does it how does it all work? I mean, can you talk to us about the functionality? I mean, I think everyone has a good idea of what a sorter is if they worked in this industry, but not necessarily kind of what you've created with the robotics and all that. So, how do the nuts and bolts of it work, and how is it bringing the value to the end user, the people that install it or go with it?
Yeah, so usually when we think of a conveyor that's sorting freight, it's typically a straight line with diverts coming off it, or it's a loop if it's a very big operation. And what that means is that you, as you said in the intro, takes up a lot of footprint, it's fixed infrastructure, you can't remove it. So what I looked at instead was how can we build a solution that runs on a table surface? That was pretty important because if you have a solution that runs on the floor, it doesn't really work in brownfield sites. Because as we all know, we've all been to a million warehouses where we've seen cracks on the floors, uneven surfaces, all those kinds of things. That's not what robots like. So what I had as a sort of first requirement is it has to run on a table surface. I also had a requirement that, as I said before, we need to get it sorting down to the pallet, the van, the order level, so that we can then avoid that resorting activity and then making it suitable for the small to medium size operations. So what we essentially do is we build a large table structure. Well, when I say large, it's 3.6 meters by 1.5 meters tall. And then it can be as long as you'd like it to be. I'm sure that I hope everybody in the logistics world can convert that into feet and inches. I certainly can't. Maybe, um, maybe you can fill us in, Ben, with some help later. But basically, what that means is that we have this large table structure running through the warehouse, either along the side or through the center. And it's a completely modular system. The robots run on top. And then what they do is they drop the cartons or the items into a hole located on that table structure. And it does that using an unloading method that we've invented, where we essentially put a barrier above the robot that the item impacts, and then that holds the item in place, and then the item comes off the back of the robot and down the hole. What it means is that unlike some of the other robotic solutions out there, we only use the forward momentum of the robot to unload the parcel instead of using the complexity of a flipper or a conveyor system, which adds a lot of cost and a lot of weight to the hardware.
Yeah, and there's some I actually look, Dom, there's some very cool videos that are out there on YouTube, computer generated, and I think some real ones too that show exactly what you're talking about. So I encourage the listeners to go check that out because it is a very ingenious, a very unique and almost simple in how it operates, but it seems to be very effective. And like you mentioned, traditionally with big sorters, they are a giant monument in the fulfillment center. And you're right, everything has to be, the floor has to be super level, everything has to be in place for them to be installed. And once they're installed, that's it. The whole place has to kind of move and operate around them after that. But in a lot of places in warehouses that are maybe an older building, you don't have all that. The floor might not be level. There's cracks in it. They may need to be modular, and so those are not good candidates, I don't think, for sorters for exactly the reason like you mentioned. So it seems like what you're offering is much more, a much more greedy solution, a modular solution doesn't have all of these prerequisites that usually block this type of program for businesses of that size. So I really like that.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
So something else that we've put into the system as well is the table structure is completely made out of timber. It's not made out of steel. It's not welded. So what it's actually designed to, the way I actually developed it was I worked with a local kitchen cabinet maker, and he actually helped me design a table structure that any kitchen cabinet maker could build. And the reason
Yeah.
we did that was because it means that if we do go into more remote areas, we don't need to import the infrastructure from overseas. Instead, we can actually engage local trades who can build that for us using a local supply chain. Because the last thing I want to be doing as an automation vendor is, sourcing materials in Los Angeles or another major city and transporting them into the middle of a country.
Yeah, and that's great that you mentioned that, because once so I have worked at operations that knew nothing but using a sorter, and then I've gone from them to a family-run company that they had never used it before in their life, right? But then eventually one was installed, and it's a little bit like going from maps in your car to GPS. You know what I mean? Once you go to GPS, you go, "Oh, how did I live without this?" type thing. And people usually make that same transition when they start to use a sorter. If the sorter goes down or breaks, they think, "Oh, we can't. We our operation is stopped. We can't work now." Well, you were running operations without it a year ago. They just got so used to it and relying on it. And so to be able to get out there and use local products to wherever you go is a big time advantage. So let me ask you this: like, who are your type customers? I mean, we kind of alluded to who I think you're going after, but who are they? Like, well, how big, how small? Where are they usually located? Like, how do you go after who's your who's your bread and butter? I guess I should say, of the perfect type of customer to use Nexobot.
Um, I think, as we basically alluded to, people who
Yeah.
traditionally would really ignore automation as a
Yep.
solution. What we're looking at really is supporting that 80 to 90% of operations where they look at automation and they go, that's too hard. We're
Yeah.
looking for people who are doing less, a few thousand items per day. That's really where we're comfortable. So we can go as low as, say, 700 to 800 items per day, which is, as we know, is really low volumes for most
Yeah.
fulfillment operations these days, but they do exist, right the way through to somewhere in the region of 6 to 7,000 items.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing for listeners out there to think about is it's not necessarily the size of your facility or how much revenue you do. What we wanna know is what's your throughput, right? Like, how
Yeah.
many sorts are required? How many boxes are you gonna put through? So, Dom, you use a service model, that is operator pay, or you use a robotics as a service model for your pricing, which brief description means that the operators are paying an ongoing cost per sort versus a big capex upfront cost type thing. So how did you arrive at that as your strategy? And then what are the benefits for the operators out there for using that? Because I'm sure that they will almost always have a question for you at some point in the exploratory phase. Why is this the model, and how does that benefit me? So what say you on that and the benefit of that for your model?
Yeah, so there's quite a few benefits. The first one is it makes it a lot easier for the operators to say yes to the solution. If you've got a business and you do some quick maths and you look at my pricing structure and you go, hey, I'm going to save net 30 cents an item, and that makes sense to you, and that's enough volume for you to justify the work required to install one of our solutions, then the business case should be relatively easy to say yes to and to, commence with the projects. The second one is a lot of the time projects get stuck in the decision-making loop of, the warehouse operators think it's a great idea, but then as soon as they present it to the leadership within the leadership in the business will often laugh them out of the room, or they'll say, hey, I'm going to spend $2 million on what you're doing on, putting a parcel sorter in, even if it makes the best commercial sense, because businesses have priorities.
Yep.
The other one as well for me is it's about me taking a bet on my products. I'm not asking people to believe in my solution. I believe enough in my solution to put the money down and to actually back it for installation.
Yeah, and you're right. Going to the chief operating officer, the CEO, as the ops director, and saying $2-3 million for a sorter sounds cool, but in my experience, once that happens, if they do sign that check, the amount of pressure that falls on your shoulder after that to deliver and prove its worth is huge, right? But it seems like with the solution that you offer, you can start to see the return on investment right away. You should
Yeah.
be able to see the value of it right away, and then everybody like feels good about that, and you don't have this giant pressure and this giant capex that you have to do. Now, I mean, if you're a business and you're just absolutely flush with cash or whatever, but I don't know anybody out there that is just can quickly write a check for $3 million unless it's the big time fulfillment centers and distribution centers that have hundreds across the country, and that's not really your customer like what we already established. So your customer doesn't sound like it's going to be like, oh yeah, 3 million. There you go. Let's let me know when I can come take a tour of it and
Yeah.
see it. So
It also is as well. So we are also talking to bigger players as well, because bigger players have priorities. Like, the FedExes and UPSs of the world, they can't automate every single operation in their entire network, especially in remote and regional areas where they don't have the
that's a
throughput
good
to
point.
the conveyor. I still want to talk to those kind of people because they're the kind of people that, they're not going to deliver, you know, millions of dollars worth of benefit per annum for every Nexobot system that they install. But if they put 20 or 30 in, they sure could.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too. That's a good point too. It could be a big, well-known operation, but they have a satellite branch or a small site. Because you mentioned FedEx and UPS, and I've been in some FedEx and UPS facilities that were huge and fast, and I've been in some where that were very rural and very small. So I think that's a very, very important point there too. So let me ask you this question. Sorters, when people think of sorters, they think fast, tons of conveyor belt rollers everywhere, feet that push boxes across the side. So you don't really have any of that. So I didn't see any rollers or in the solution that you provide. So what have you seen to be the benefits of the robots as the method of transporting the product, vice traditional rollers that you see in big giant conveyors and sorters?
So the first one is obviously cost and time to install.
Yeah.
When we show up on site, we're typically on site for a week or two in order to install and commission a system. That's because we can pre-assemble components off site. The robots, when they're ready to be installed, they just get dropped right into the operation. There's no need to, code the PLCs or write custom
Yeah.
software. That's all done in advance. And so when we get on site, we just put the system in and get it to work as quickly as possible. Because, with that robotics as a service model, if I have the system sat there for 3 months without generating any volume, well, guess what? I'm not getting paid either. So I'm heavily incentivized to get that thing up and running as quickly as I can. The other big benefit too is the ability to troubleshoot and fix problems. When you
Mm.
take a look at a conveyor system, if you have one roller that's out of thousands of rollers, that's that entire loop gone until you can fix that one roller. With
Yep.
a robotic-based system, you can go in, you can take that one robot off the system, you can replace it, you can return it to the navigation, you can reset it, without interrupting the rest.
Yeah, that's a really key point too, and I didn't really think about that. You're right. Conveyors have, I mean, the sorters will usually have some type of hospital lane or holding pattern that they
Mm.
go into. But if any piece of the machinery breaks, there's not really like an emergency lane like how there is on interstate or anything like that. It's broken, like you said, until it's fixed. And a lot of them are moving very fast. It may not seem like a big deal if a piece of machinery is broken for 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 15 minutes, but with the throughput that's happening in these places, that's a pretty big backlog. So I think you're right. Like being able to just remove the triage the one broken piece, and hey, the system is running again just like that because I took it off the line. It's very fast. And what did I did did you say exactly what the installation time was? Because I've been through a sorter project before, Dom, and it was months. It was
Yeah.
months to get this thing up, and it required design and everything, and we had to change everything and change our whole operation around it to account for that. So did I hear you right in your
Yeah.
quickness of installation? Because that's just way faster than what I think most people would expect or used.
Yeah, so recently I was driving up through regional Australia. I don't know if how well everybody knows Australia, but it's very, very big and very, very empty.
Yeah.
I actually drove a total of 13 hours over the course of 2 days into essentially the middle of the desert. Met with a potential customer, spent 2 or 3 hours designing the sorter for their operation, and a week later we had a signed service agreement. So not only
Wow.
is it really quick to install, but because we've built everything to come out of sort of prefabricated modules, we can just pull the modules together depending on the customer requirements to design an entire sourcing system. So we can literally go from first meeting to sign contracts in a week, 90 days to build the robots, and then another 2 weeks for the physical installation.
Yeah, that's fast. I mean, and this industry is notorious for being impatient. It's just
Yeah.
the nature of the beast, I think, and how it operates with speed and get it there and make it so if you're telling these people to be patient, maybe that's not the best crowd. So I think you're onto something on there on that point with speed of build. I think that's really cool. So let me ask you a little bit about the software though, like what's going on the inside of because without getting too in the weeds, me, can you just tell us about how does the software work? How do we if I use it, how easy is it to program to set up the lanes, the downshoot lanes for the sort and all those type things? What's the how much of a lift is it for the operators to use it? And then what's the programming look like on it inside on your end?
Yeah, so we've built everything as a cloud application. So we don't host anything locally, which means that it's all stored on our AWS servers, which means that we don't have to put on-site servers either. So all we need to put on site is a small little black box, which is essentially like a communications hub between the different robots, and that's it. So all you do on the web application is you upload a CSV file with your sort plan that you want to load into. You then integrate it to your transport management system, which if they're using an API and they've got some fairly standard endpoints, is relatively easy to do. And then we drop the robots in and then they start running around. The way that the robots actually work is they are essentially a line following robot. And you'll see this on our website if you check it out, which means that we have a very, very simple navigation system. A
Yeah.
lot of other robotic systems use a grid of QR codes, which is something we've probably all seen a lot of videos and photos of, which are great. But what that means is that you need to have what's called an orchestration server on sites, which is able to handle the navigation for the individual robots. What my robots do is they drive up to an intersection, they check if anybody else is using that intersection that has a higher priority, and then they go if it's not in use otherwise.
I
So we do
gotcha.
that
I got
all on site with a mesh network instead of using servers.
Yeah, that's very cool too, because so you don't have to have local on support, IT or anything like that. You just reach out to Nexobot for the support. So let me ask this question though: what about operational contingencies? I mean, I know we briefly talked about, hey, if the if the robot breaks, we simply take it, remove it, and the whole system continues to operate. But what about maintenance of the robots and weight? Do you have any like weight restriction and those type things? Because if you've been around ops long enough, and I know that you have, you know that contingencies happen. I mean, they're a nature of the beast, and things type happen. So how does the system handle troubleshooting or things like that?
Yeah, so as far as like day-to-day troubleshooting is concerned, as I said, most of it is operator managed. So you
Yeah,
can put the robots back into the navigation lane, you can remove them. And if a robot does, need a full repair, what we do is when we deploy on our system, because we use that robotics as a service model, I just keep some spare robots at each customer site that can then be switched in for damaged units. And the robots are designed specifically to be light enough so they can be put into a carton and then shipped back to us for repairs and reintroduction into the fleets.
I got you. So it's a little bit like Netflix, right? Like you just hold on to this, and then send me the other one while you watch this one, type thing, and you just do the change out. I like that. The original Netflix, I should say, Dom,
The
with
original
the
one.
DVDs in the mail, not current like how Netflix is now. So now let me ask this question, because if I th- so th- this solution sounds very appealing to me, by the way, because when I look back at some time I spent at a family owned company, I just think that this would have been an absolute perfect solution. We just didn't have it back then, and we didn't know about it back then. But I wish that I would have had it back then. I've had a couple of people on my podcast where I say that about their services. But in terms of the pre work, so what happens in the facilities before you get there? Like, what does it look like, taste like, smell like, feel like for them to get ready? Like, how big of a lift is it for them? What type of data do you need before you show up on site to install? What do you expect out of your customers to do for you?
Yeah, so scoping and design phase is really just about pulling together a business case for the customer. So what kind of data we would typically need from that is what's their current labor looking like that we're going to be modifying as a result of the system. What's the throughput that they're doing? What's their hours of operations? Let's just make sure this makes sense commercially for both parties. And then after that, it's simply integration and clearing the floor space for us to come in. And if the integration is simple enough, it shouldn't be a particularly challenging process to do that.
Yeah, and does it does it is it the same thing if if I have this in my facility A or my facility 1, and then I want to expand in facility 2 somewhere else in the United States or somewhere else in Australia, does it have to be done again? Or do I have to go through that same type thing, or do you just need to quickly see how that facility is laid out? Yeah, there's no problems, there's no geographical barriers in the way, and I can rinse, repeat, and have it up even faster in site number 2 or site number 3 than I put it up in site number 1. Like, what does the expansion look like once people grow?
I wish it was that simple, but as we always know, the best laid plans in logistics, right? Every facility is unique and different, but I'm hoping that thanks to the modular nature and the simplicity of the integration, we should be able to go from site to site relatively quickly. But of course, every single operation has its quirks. You know,
Yeah.
I've never been into a warehouse. I'm sure you've never been into a warehouse, Ben, and not gone, well, that just doesn't make sense. But then you kind of can think about it and you kind of realize, why the operator was doing that. And there's usually a good reason for it.
Yeah, I worked in a warehouse one time, Dom, and there was in the exact middle of the facility was an office, like an
Yeah.
office setting. And so the whole warehouse sort of like diverted around the office. And I remember thinking, what who would build this here? Like, why would anyone build an office in here? So I think it just depends on the age and when the building was built. And they're built to be throughput centers now, distribution centers, but I think once upon a time they were just built to be warehouses
Yeah.
and store stuff. They didn't really think about that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Probably because, um, you know, random racks, random pallet staging areas. Yeah. But as I said, there's usually always a reason for most things.
yeah. And now if somebody okay, so if I spec my operation with you for a certain throughput. I want to achieve a thousand per hour, 1,000 per day, or whatever. And then if I want to increase the throughput, is that just as simple as adding more robots, or do you need to possibly change the size of the table that they operate on too? Could it be just the robots, or does it always need to be both? If I'm getting faster,
Yeah, look, I think we need to. So hopefully it'll be just the robots, but there's obviously a
yeah,
point that hits the capacity of the table as well. We've designed the robots specifically to go quite slow. So we're all about putting lots of slow robots in because that's better aligned to modern safety standards as well. Because it's all well and good saying, "Hey, my robot goes um, and again, apologies for the for talking in
meters.
meters here, but it goes at 0.7 meters per. My robot goes at 3 meters per second. But then, in order to go at 3 meters per second, you have to put barriers up. You have to put additional sensors on the robots. Instead, what
Yeah,
we do, we run our robots nice and slow, which makes them significantly safer for operators as well. So there is obviously a point at which we're not the right solution for you, but I don't think that's the majority of operations.
yeah, and it probably helps, I think, too, with just the efficiency of the operation. You probably get less downtime there too, because extreme speed type robotics tend to be, in my experience, more prone to errors and faults and slip ups and breaks. And I think when you walk into I've had some robotics people on the podcast before, and I've mentioned this, that now when you walk into a facility, if you're doing let's say you're doing a customer tour. Hey, the customer wants to come in, they want to see the product, or they want to see how we operate. When you have a machine and a system like what you're talking about, it's just it's just mesmerizing for people to watch. One, I mean, it's great for tours. Obviously, all the operational benefits that we just mentioned are there, but just confidence building, and presentation, display of what people give to their customers. I think it's always a big win for that too, and especially something that is more cost effective for them to do. So I think this is a really good thing. So you mentioned that mostly you are in Australia right now, but are you trying to grow the solution in the United States? Because I think I think there's a market for it, right? I think there's a lot of facilities out there that could really benefit from this. So what's your strategy there, to get from
Yeah.
Australia to the US?
Look, so we're not quite ready to go live in the US yet. This is my, first exploration of the US market, this visit that I'm doing at the moment. But what I am looking for is for people who are interested in being foundation customers. If you have an interest in what we're doing, listening to this today, and you think, hey, maybe I'll give it a crack. That's an Australian term. Sorry about that. But basically,
Okay.
yeah,
Get it.
we'll give it a go. And if you think that could be you, please reach out to me. I'm here for another 3 weeks, and I'd love to come and visit some warehouses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, like in Australia, so I did some research on. I know you've won some awards, right? So I know you won an award down there, and the Australian government is proud of you and really hyping you up. And so, I mean, you're making good headway. I mean, this seems like a good solution. And I can tell you from experience, the moment that I saw it, that I saw the video of how it was operating, and I saw the demographic, the type of customer that you're going after, I thought this is a great solution, right? There are businesses out there that could jump onto this, and it would be fantastic for them, and they get the operational benefits that a sorter provides at much, much, much less the cost, and something that is the size and shape customized for their facility that they run. I really do believe that. I think there's people out there that'll be interested in this, and I hope that you find them, and I hope that you have great success in Australia. But selfishly, I hope you come to the US, Dom. Right? I hope you start building this in the US, because I think it's really good, and I hope people reach out to you if they're listening.
Yeah. So, look, one of the reasons why that's happened in Australia is, I was part of a program run by a robotics hub in Australia called Arm Hub. And when I was there, one of the priorities for the Australian government is actually to identify robotics technologies that can be the first piece of automation for a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. Because, we're no longer getting the same productivity boosts that we used to get as a result of making processes better. What we need to do in order to improve productivity, we actually need to turn to automation more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that's key for the future, but certainly at the level that you're at. So where can people find out more about you? If they want to find out more about you or Nexobot, where do they go?
Yeah, pretty simple. Unfortunately, it's still www.nexobot.com.au. So remember .com.au. But if you Google Nexobot, you'll probably find us at the top of Google. And in there, there's a book a meeting link. For the next 3 weeks, I've set my calendar to US times. So feel free to book a meeting with me over Microsoft Teams. We'll have a quick chat. And if we think that there's some sort of alignment, I'd be happy to head out to any warehouses.
Awesome. Awesome, Dom. Well, so I will put those links on my website where the video plays on the warehouseunderground.com. And good luck to you, my friend. Thank you very much again for coming on the show, and best of luck your trip in Boston, and safe travels back to Australia when you fly back.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Take care, man. All right, guys, that concludes this show today. Thank you again for Dom and Nexobot for coming on to talk about that stuff. I wish I could show the video that they have on YouTube that shows how his product worked. So please go check that out. Search for it, Nexobot, like I did on YouTube. Very cool video. Very good product. Going to serve a lot of needs, I think, out there in the industry. As the Warehouse Underground goes, please sign up for the community if you've not done so. We've got 216 members in the community. We have networking in there, message boards, and we have more live shows. We just did a live show a couple weeks ago, and more coming down the pipe. You need to be a member of the community in order to take part in the live show. So please do that. Check out the Tiger Team, which is another show that I do with my co-host Jordan, which is about life in warehouses and distribution centers, but with a wit, humor, and sarcasm slant to it. If you work out there in the industry, you will know right away what we are referencing and talking about in that show if you listen to that. So please take a look or listen to the Tiger Team, and look for episode 6 next week. We're going to try to get that out next week if we can, but no promises. As this podcast goes, thank you guys again. I will see you next week for episode number 28. Thank you. God bless.